in the last few lectures, we already discussed about the many of the important uh, reformers, leaders, also some of the important movements such as Khilafat movement, non-cooperation movement in the Indian history. Right now, we are going to discuss about the one more social and the political reformer who consists an important place in Indian history, who is Jyotiba Phule. We need to introduce Jyotiba Phule. He was born in 1827 in Pune, and he belongs to a gardener family. We also called it as a Mali, or we can say that Mali family, basically who actually take care of the flowers. And he belonged to the Shudra Varna caste, which is just below the caste of Maratha Kundis in Maharashtra. He was educated at a Marathi school with a brief period at a mission school in Pune. And later on, he started working as a social reformer in 1848. He also focused on educational standard of lower caste boys and the girls. He was more concerned about the lower caste people, particularly the young boys and the girls. And he also established a girls' school for low and untouchable caste in 1848 with his wife Savitri Bai as the teacher. He opened two more girls' schools in 1851. He was honored by the Board of Education in 1852 for his work in girls' education. He established a school for untouchables and a night school in 1852. Friends, he was retired from school management in 1858 due to his more orientation towards the broader social reform, and he supported the widow remarriage movement that was started in 1860, because we know that widows were living in a very bad situation in these days. So he established a home for the prevention of infanticide in 1863. He also adopted an orphan child uh, because he is not having any children of their own. He published a book on the caste system in 1865, written by his friend Padwal. He founded the Satya Sodhak Samaj in 1873 to organize lower caste against the Hindu social order based on Varna and caste system. Friends, Jyotiba Phule was very much against the caste system or the Varna system, because as per him, this order created a kind of subjugation of the lower class or the lower caste people. So one of his colleagues started the first newspaper of the movement, which is Deen Bandhu, in 1877. He was appointed as a member of the Pune municipality in 1876 and served until 1882. And then he advocated for the downtrodden causes, such as the lower class of the people, because he was knowing the situation of the lower class people, and for their upliftment and their prosperity in every aspect of the life, economic, political, social, and educational, he advocated for their rights. Apart from involving in the so many reform activities, he also written so many things about the exploitation of the lower caste, and he also focused on the or explored the exploitation done by the Brahmins, which he already expressed in many of his writings, such as Brahmanache Kasab in 1869, which exposed the exploitation of the Brahmin priest. Later on, in 1873, he also wrote a book Gulamgiri, which provides a historical survey of the slavery of the lower caste. Later on, Jet Karyalcha Asu, which he written in 1883, which is a collection of the speeches which basically analyze the exploitation of the peasants. And then again, he also written the Sarvajanaik Satya Dharma Pustak in 1891, which actually consists the philosophical statement influenced by the Christianity and the ideas of the Thomas Paine. Friends, he was very much influenced by the thinkers Thomas Paine. And he also endorsed the idea of religious radicalism from the Thomas Paine, as Phule himself recorded, and he facilitated and conferred with the title of the Mahatma by the people of Bombay in 1888 for his work for the lower caste. And Phule's writing basically were in Marathi, which aimed to masses and pose a challenge for scholars due to language barriers. Friends, you know that at that time, Britishers have a kind of dominance in Indian government and they were ruling over India. So there are some responses that was made by the Jyotiba Phule towards the Britishers, some in positive sense and some in the negative sense. So basically we are going to discuss some positive response of the Britishers, of the Jyotiba Phule towards the Britishers. So Phule recognized the positive impact of the British rule in Maharashtra. So he bring an end to the tyranny of the last Peshwa. So how he sees the British rule? Basically, he sees that the British rule basically propagated a principle of equality before the law. And finally, British rule also provided some opportunities in education and occupation mobility for the all castes. So Phule believed that the British rulers who believed in equality and also emancipate lower caste from Brahmin domination. This was the belief of the Phule towards the Britishers and their values. So he saw that British rule as an opportunity for the lower caste to acquire power locally and enter the colonial bureaucracy. So Phule basically advocated for the abolition of the Brahmin positions of power and the appointment of the village headman based on the merit. He urged the British government to abolish caste-specific occupations and discriminatory customs of the practices. Phule wished to have a non-Brahmin bureaucracy and believed British officers would be impartial and likely to side with the lower caste. So, when he recognized the lack of education and political consciousness among the lower caste, Phule cautioned against the high caste elites, those who were dominating the political movements. He advised lower caste people not to participate in the movements led by the high caste and warned them against the selfish motives of the Brahmins in the formation of the political associations. So Phule basically create a kind of awareness or the consciousness among the lower caste against the Brahmins because mainly Brahmins were dominating the many of the political movements. That's why they were not only dominating but also for their own motives. That's why Phule created a kind of consciousness among the lower caste people that do not participate in their movements. So he basically emphasized the loyalty towards the British government and considered their rule as just, enlightened and beneficial for the masses. So he understood that the significance of the political power for the upliftment of the lower caste and considered his effort to organize them under the Satyashodak Samaj as political activity. So Phule's writings basically have some objective to empower the lower caste politically and envisaged a scenario where they would challenge Brahmin supremacy and established their own supremacy. Till now, we explored the Fule's response, I mean some positive response towards the Britishers. Now, Fule also critiqued the British government, but on what basis? That we need to discuss here. So, Fule basically criticized the British educational policy for favoring the higher education or mass education, and British education policy neglected the needs of the lower classes. That's why Fule criticized the British education policy. And he pointed out that the revenue was primarily generated from the labor of the masses, and yet the government allocated more funds to higher education for the upper class. Mainly the revenue were generated from the lower classes, but in terms of allocation of the funds, they were more oriented towards the upper classes for the higher education. So that was also a point of criticism in the eye of Fule. So Fule advocated for reducing the dominance of high caste in administration, and the increasing representation of lower caste to promote the welfare of the marginalized class. And he also authored a book on the slavery to highlight the effects of the high class education on the masses, and also criticized high class for keeping the lower class in the ignorance and the poverty. Fule also criticized that government-run primary schools for providing unsatisfactory education that was impractical and not useful for students' future and their careers. He also scrutinized higher secondary schools, colleges, and scholarship system for being biased towards literary caste and neglecting lower caste children. Even though many of the moderate nationalists criticized the colonial bureaucracy for deviating from liberal principles, Fule agreed but distinguished between British and the Brahmin officers while preferring the former. So, however, he noted that the British officers were often detached from the real condition of the peasants and being preoccupied with their comfort and the salaries, which allowed Brahmin officers to exploit the poor. So Fule demonstrated courage by opposing lavish spending on the viceroy's visit and delivering a speech in the peasants' attire during a dinner for the Duke of Connaught. So he emphasized the government's responsibility towards the welfare of the peasants. His writings also criticized the government policies that actually created harm for the peasants and also keep them disadvantaged. So he also reflected his concern for the economic well-being of the marginalized class. Fule was a great critic of the Indian social system. He criticized the Indian social system or the Indian society because he understood that Indian society was based on the caste hierarchy. Fule's first criticism towards the British government generated from his concern for the lower class, or we can say that welfare and the status of the lower caste in the society. So he believed that Indian society was attributed with the inequality and the exploitation of the ignorant masses by the Brahmins. Fule developed a kind of critique of Indian society based on these fundamental principles were aimed to challenge and dismantle the system of inequality and exploitation. He also challenged the notion that the Varna system was God ordained and asserted that it was fabricated by cunning Brahmins to deceive the lower Varnas. So Fule looked at the Varna system as a system which actually was to exploit the lower caste and to keep them subjugated for always. He interpreted religious texts to depict the Brahmins as Aryans conquerors who defeated the original inhabitants of India and imposed the Varna and caste system to maintain control over the masses. So, friends, according to Fule, Brahmins devised a system of priestcraft to elevate themselves in rituals and established superiority while denigrating, denigrating Sudras and untouchables with hatred and contempt. He compared the Brahmin system of slavery to that in America and argued that Sudras suffered greater oppression. He also criticized the Brahmin domination in his time, and he noted that despite British rule, Brahmins continued to exploit Shudras in all aspects of life, including the administration, judiciary, and social organization. So Brahmins basically monopolize the position in education, administration, and governance, and also acquired power at all levels of the society. So Phule advocated for the organization of the lower caste and untouchables against Brahmin domination to strive for an egalitarian society. And his concern was basically to extend the to extended his concern was his concern extended to both Shudras and untouchables, and he emphasized the need for these marginalized groups to unite against Brahmin oppression. So Dr. Ambedkar, later a prominent figure in Indian social reformer, we know that he is a very prominent figure in Indian history. He regarded Phule as his guru and highlighting the influence of the Phule's ideas on the movement against caste discrimination. Phule also propagated or considered equality of men and the women. Phule emphasized the inclusion of the women alongside men while discussing human rights, rejecting the assumption that men automatically represent both genders. He criticized the Hindu religious texts for granting concession to men while imposing severe restrictions on women. Those were perpetuating male domination. So Phule focused on the oppressive marriage system of his time, and he condemned the practices such as child marriage, marriage between young girls and old men, polygamy, and also opposition to the widow remarriage and harassment of the widows. His advice, he advised Shudras, peasants against having multiple wives and marrying of their young children. So Phule proposed a modern and simplified marriage ritual for members of the Satyasodhak Samaj, like truth-seeking society, and also challenge the traditional customs and practices. Other than advocating for equal status for women in marriage, family, education, and religion, Phule asserted that women were superior to men in many aspects of the life. He also focused on the economic problem of his own time, such as he identified so many factors those were contributing to the agriculture crisis, such as increase in the population dependent on agriculture with few opportunities in the army or administration. Because friends, we know that particularly at that time there were very few opportunities in the administration and the army. Mostly or the majorly people were dependent on the agriculture sector. So the establishment of the forest department by the new government restricted access to forest resources. Those were essential for the farmers and their livelihoods. British officers raised the land taxes and also despite of declining farmer incomes. Exploitation of the farmers by the moneylenders and Brahmin officers in revenue, irrigation and judiciary departments. Farmers were trapped in cycles of indebtedness due to harsh poverty and their deteriorating land conditions that leads them to the transfer of lands to moneylenders. So unfair competition from British goods causing losses to indigenous craftsmen and rural unemployment due to closure of the business and job losses in cottage workshops. He also suggested some solutions of agriculture problems, like Phule proposed the construction of the bunds, tanks, and dams to ensure the sufficient water availability for farming, emphasizing the importance of irrigation infrastructure. He also advocated for government-led initiatives including soil conservations, animal breeding, and teaching of modern farming techniques to improve the agriculture productivity. Phule also have some suggestion such as holding annual agriculture exhibition to showcase advancements and disseminate knowledge among the farmers. He highlighted the needs to make agriculture profitable to ensure the success of agriculture. Agriculture banks emphasize the importance of reducing the tax burden on farmers. Phule compared the meager income of the farmers, even after paying taxes, to the significantly higher income of Brahmins and British officers, underscoring the economic disparities. While welcome the British rule initially, Phule recognized the detrimental impact of the colonialism on the rural economy, and he also noted that how health was drained from the peasant economy to the Brahmin domain. Phule did not make class differentiation within the peasantry. He also focused instead on the collective economic struggles of farmers and advocated for the solutions to benefit all. Phule advocated a universal idea of religion because he refused to uh, Hinduism's idolatry and the rituals. He advocated for a monotheistic belief in one God without intermediaries. He believed only in one God. He envisioned Sarvajanik Satya Dharma to replace Hinduism. He criticized the Brahmin domination and the sacred texts like Vedas. Phule also accused the Brahmin founded associations like the Pratna Samaj, which was perpetuating deception and defending Brahmin interest. Friends, while he rejected Hinduism, he promoted a based on universal religion based on liberty and equality, influenced by radical religious thinkers like Thomas Paine. Phule propagated, propagated a universal religion which allowed for individual belief within families and opposed the communalism and advocated for government intervention against inhuman religious practices. Friends, now we are going to conclude the, or we can summarize the contribution of the Phule in few words. Like Phule in 19th century was working as a social reformer from Maharashtra. He also challenged the exploitative caste system devised by the Brahmins upon migrating to India. He also critiqued the both Indian social order and Hinduism. He advocated for liberation from Brahmin dominance while recognized the potential of the British rule for emancipation. He also criticized its reliance on Brahmin subordinates and unfavorable economic policies for the peasants. Phule proposed the solution for agriculture improvement, and he also dreamed a society based on individual liberty and equality. He also advocated for a universal religion to replace Hinduism. That's how we can conclude the contribution of the Jyotirao Phule made in the 19th century. That was quite important to understand the exploitation of the lower caste and in terms of understanding their situation, while many of the upper class were exploiting the lower class, and that was clearly uh, opposed by the Jyotiba Phule in the 19th century. That's how we can summarize the contribution of the Jyotirao Phule in 19th century towards the social and the political reform in Indian history. Thank you.